Agine Vyomavad Vyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Good. So, moving along with the questions. Some nice questions as usual. So, go on to the next one. This says, when reading the Gita, there are some incidents which seem supernatural. For example, Kunti's conception of Karna. How do we explain this to our present generation? Okay. So this is a very interesting thing. There are certain clarifications first. So this particular example that is given, this Kunti's conception, it's not mentioned in the Gita. Okay. This is in the Mahabharata. Okay. So I'll just clarify that. Then, how do we explain this to our present generation? This also. I think there are a couple of things. Who's the present generation? We are also present generation. Okay. We are older, that's all. We still belong to the present generation. Generation doesn't only mean young children. But in any case, how do you explain? How do we explain anything to anybody, whether they're children or adults or elder people? We explain depending on what we know, how we understand, really. So the point is, it is how do we understand these things? Okay. Explaining to others is secondary. Because if we don't know, then we're really not explaining, we're just saying something. So, and the difference is we talk to people depending on their age. So with children, you talk in a certain way, depending on their understanding, really speaking. So anyway, so those are all incidentals. But here, so there are a lot of things that come up in the itihasas, in Ramayana, Mahabharata. So which are don't look natural. They don't seem to follow the natural uh, laws that we are familiar with. Okay, that we are familiar with. So we call them supernatural. So here, this one particular instance is there about Kunti. So Kunti having Karna. Well, first of all, it doesn't say anywhere that this her conception of Karna was supernatural. Doesn't say that in Mahabharata. So it doesn't say that. So we have to assume it was natural. Okay. If it was supernatural, it would say it is. We don't have it. There's no necessity to say that. The reason we bring it up perhaps sometimes is because we are used to this idea of like this conception. The what do they call this? The immaculate conception and things like that. We don't need to get into those things. Okay, those are all doctrines. They are doctrines of the church. They are beliefs. Beliefs means you have to accept those things. There is no trying to figure out. Okay. We have to try and figure it out. When the uh, itihasas talk about certain things, okay, then we have to figure it out how it could be, how it true or not true, and what is the message. So this is a message that we are trying to understand. So here, if you look at it, uh, in case of, so you go back to Mahabharata, you know, the particular story about birth, any birth you take, any conception, okay, okay. How does a conception take place, really? From medical standpoint, okay, just from a medical standpoint. So conception takes place because of, so conjugal relationship, okay. So between is a pair. Okay, fine, good enough. But is that the only thing? Is that the only thing? Not really. Not really, because so there are a lot of people who try to conceive, but they are not able to conceive. Okay. So then you know that, I'm sure you know some people, each one of us know. Then they go to the doctor and they try this and they try that. There's nothing wrong with you, and this is trying and trying and trying. Everybody gets upset. So what does the doctor say finally? He's saying, it is in God's hands, right? Finally, you tell them, "Vijay, you don't worry about it. It's all in God's hands. Everything is in God's hands." Okay. This is the thing. This is the important thing to keep in mind. When we look at all the happenings and all the laws and all that are there around us and why things happen, we have some explanations up to a point. But then beyond that point, it is in God's hands. Really speaking, it is in Bhagavan's hands. So that is one important thing to keep in mind in terms of the message of our scriptures. Okay. So here is a very interesting story in Mahabharata. So basically, the background is certain background is there. So the Pandu, what happened here was that Pandu had two wives, Kunti and Madri. Okay. So for some other reasons that are given, so he was cursed that he would not be able to have children. Okay. That was the curse. So anyway, now backtracking, what happens is, so when Kunti was growing up, she was growing up in the home of her adopted parent who was her uncle. So there, as a teenager, her one of her duties was when any sages and all came, then she was in charge of making sure that they were taken care of. So she took care of him and all that. So there was one sage, very well known. His name was Durvasas. And so he came, he visited there. And so she took good care of him. So he was happy with her service. And so he could foresee the future. That was one of his siddhis. Could foresee the. So in that he realized or he recognized that so later on in her life she would have this particular problem. Okay, so she would not be able to conceive. So when she got married, so this he could foretell. And so he knew one mantra, and he taught her this particular mantra called Devata Vashikarana mantra. Okay. So it's according to this, he tells her. So he teaches us this mantra. And then what is it supposed to do? What is this mantra supposed to do? So here he says very clearly, he tells him that this mantra is going to where is this? Let me get to this question. Okay. Yam yam devam tvametena mantrena avaha ishyasi. Tasya prasadena putra tava bhavishyati. So he says with this mantra, so whichever God you invoke, by the blessing of that particular devata, your child will be endowed with those qualities. Okay. The qualities that are highlighted in a with respect to a particular devata, those qualities your child will have. So this is the power of the mantra. Like that, he gave her the mantra. So anyway, so that was all over, and then he goes away. Now, of course, she being immature, teenager, what happens? She conceives. Okay, she conceives by natural means. That it doesn't get into any details about any magical conception and things like that. The point here is that so she wants to check out this how this thing is, whether any god you worship, then those particular qualities are going to be there in the child. All this comes whatever she thinks, and anyway she ends up conceiving. And after she conceived, she had invoked Surya Devata, with this particular mantra at that time when she had conceived. And so then she gets this child Karna, who's born with all these qualities that are connected to Surya Devata. That is the background. The point here of the message in this story really has to do with Daivam. You know, it has to do with anything that we do, any actions that are there, any laws that operate in this world. We know, understand some of them, we don't understand many of them. And whatever we understand them, we also understand them to an extent, why things happen, how things happen. But there is always Daivam, which is involved in everything that goes on. All the laws ultimately come from Bhagavan alone. That is really the point of this message. The point of this message is not just, how did the, because at least in our culture, our books, our itihasas, Puranas, and all, we are not shy of talking about, somebody, couple getting together and having babies if they are not supposed to, or they are not married. Those kinds of things are plenty in our shastram. So it's not that it's not being conveyed something here, something supernatural and all that. It's not like that. It is nothing is super. It is all natural, and part of the natural order is there is Daivam. You know, we accept this, we understand this, we recognize this in our lives. So, really speaking, when you when we try to understand these things, we try to understand this in terms of Daivam, the importance of Daivam. So that is the thing. And then she had that particular, there was prayer. That's why prayers, that's why we have prayer. They are so the Pumsavanam, then Garbhadanam, Pumsavanam, Simantam. These are all rituals that we do during pregnancy. And all these rituals are in the form of prayers to Ishvara. For after all, any child, when people are having children, they all visualize their children with some great qualities. And these great qualities are symbolized with by different devatas, by gods, and so on. So that is why we name them also. So this couple who's not able to have a kid, they go, they get to the doctor. At the end of the thing, doctor says, well, it's all in God's hands. So then what happened? Then this somebody starts. So this perhaps one of them doesn't believe. Either what does God have to do with this? We can't conceive. What does God have to do with this? I don't. It's all. It doesn't believe in God. And then the other one. So well, you have nothing to lose. He starts praying. You're praying to Shiva, and then somehow they get conceived. You know, happens too. We have seen that. We know. And then the child is born, and then she says, "Yes, oh, what should we name?" So then the person will, one of them who was praying says, well, I would like to name our child Shiva Prasad. And we have like that. People name Shiva Prasad, Ganga Prasad. So, like that, all these prasads that are there this is how we do in our culture. So, by the blessings of this particular God, so much we prayed, etc. And then you were born. And so this is how you got this name. And you tell that to your child. So we recognize that all conceptions are a blessing from the Lord. And that is the idea. So she was blessed with sons, further 5 sons, all with different qualities. They're all different quality. They have same genes. Okay. They all have the same genes. They all with her husband only. They all had the same genes, but they had the blessings of different deities. That is why they were all so different from each other in their characteristics, even though they carried the same genes. And so, because of her prayers, she had these prayers she knew, and she exercised them, and the gods blessed them. And this is the message that is there in this particular story. Like that, there are many after all, these are written in the form of poetry. Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, they're all written in the form of poetry. They're not written like a history book. There is a historical background, and in that background there is a story, and that story is presented not in a prose form like a newspaper article. Nowadays, even newspaper articles are all, half of it is all poetry and uh, fantasy also. And there's no documentation. But these were all in the form of poetry, because of trying to, through them, certain knowledge, certain message was conveyed to the people. So there were certain things that are highlighted. There are some things that are exaggerated. There are some things that the poet uses a certain language, that draws. Ravana had 10 heads. How are you going to figure this out? How are you going to figure this out? You can't make this anything supernatural. So he was a supernatural person, and then he actually had 10 heads, and all this. Not, even if he had them at the time of the war, he couldn't have lived with them 24/7. This is very impractical. So these are all, they all symbolize certain ideas. And so the poet presents it in that kind of a dramatic way. But really speaking, you look at the verse that is there, it's very interesting that the Durvasa tells her that when this is, whichever, by these prayers, whatever deity you invoke, the qualities of those gods are going to be, the god will bless your child with those qualities. Like that he says, with the mantra. Anyway, so that's the idea to keep in mind. That's how we understand the background of some of these kinds of stories. The point is not the dynamics of how this happened, the dynamics of how Ravana eats his breakfast through his 10 heads and all. Those are distractions. There is a message. The message is the real content of the poetry. So it's a good, important question. We never understood these things properly. So that's why it becomes difficult how to explain. But then first thing to do about explaining to others is to first understand ourselves, then explain in a way that is relevant, depending on whoever one is talking to. Sometimes we need not say any, we need not try to justify anything. So I've taught starting from young children on, preschoolers, on to elders, different ages. But one thing is, I won't say different things to different people. I say the same thing. However I understand it, that's what I say. Only thing is, you say it in a different way, depending on who one is talking to. It's presented accordingly, but the content is never changed, because it is what it is. The way we understand it, that's how we understand it. That won't change. But depending on how young they are, how old they are, that's how we explain to them. Okay, next one. Arjuna seems to be lamenting, whining, and wailing all over first chapter, and even spills into the second chapter. What were the warriors in the opposite camp doing? Not fighting. It's true in the story, in how it's presented. They were not fighting at that time, obviously. But then here again, it's a similar thing. So the whole background of the war, this dialogue, Bhagavad Gita, you look at it, it's 18 chapters. It's pretty long. So if any of you have done Gita Parayanam, they do Gita Parayanam generally on this Gita Jayanti, and where you recite the whole Bhagavad Gita, 18 chapters of it. and with some prayers in between and all. This takes a good, can take up to 3 hours, So, this is just reciting, okay, straight, without any time to sit and think and figure out and ask questions and reply and all that. That might extend it further. So, at the very least, we are talking about a few hours, okay, of this dialogue going on. So now this is battle is just going to start. Okay. Now, what did all these people do? For 4 hours, 3 hours, everybody, there were tens of thousands of people sitting there ready to fight. So though Bhishma did not announce, well, let's all take a coffee break now first. So that after this dialogue is over, we don't know. They've started discussing. So we don't know when they're going to stop. So after they stop, then we will get going. So obviously that it's not like that. It's not like that. So that didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. Really speaking, that all these people were standing there, and then that is for 4 hours they were wondering what's going on, because obviously, so anyone who's further away doesn't even know what's going on. But then this is the picture that has been created by the writer. And so here again, that's the context. He gives it a context. There was a dialogue. The dialogue, if you look at just Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvada, the dialogue of Bhagavad Gita, there is a teaching here with a lot of content. And the teaching is the main purpose of Bhagavad Gita. It's what Sri Krishna taught. Okay. Bhagavad Gita also doesn't begin with the first chapter, really speaking. So because the dialogue doesn't begin with the first verse. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha. Sanjaya says, Sanjaya uvacha. Okay. So Sanjaya said this to Dhritarashtra, and that is where it starts from. Now, this is right in the middle of Mahabharata, this Bhagavad Gita. And so that means there are chapters before it, there are chapters after it in Mahabharata. So this particular section we pick up and say, well, this is Bhagavad Gita. Okay. But this Bhagavad Gita includes, the beginning of it is a context, which is a continuation of everything that is going on from before. And when the dialogue ends, then the whole thing continues also further, Mahabharata. So this is arbitrarily, we selected this portion. And in this portion, there is a context. And in the context, there is a dialogue. And the dialogue is the teaching. The important thing here is the teaching. So anyway, so that first portion just gives you, and there is now, he chooses this as a context. Okay. He could have put the context as the two of them sitting in the backyard and over a cup of coffee having this particular dialogue, or in a classroom, So teaching in a classroom, and then they're sitting, two of them are there, or whatever, other students are there, not there. There are different contexts in which the teaching, there are many dialogues that are there when you look at any book. So whether it is Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, there are a lot of dialogues, thousands of them, between students and teachers. And they are all dialogues in different contexts. And all these contexts also have a certain, give you a certain message, what the context is. So Sri Kartikeya teaching to Lord Shiva. So he teaches to Lord Shiva. He gives him Upadesha of teaching. And then he wants to, they have a conversation about this Omkara, Pranava Omkara. And then, so this his son Kartikeya, he's a boy, little boy. He wants to teach him, explain to him. And so the father this humors him. He will say, okay, tell me what you know. And then he says, well, how can I tell you? Because as a teacher, I'm supposed to be sitting above you. You are so big, I'm so small. How am I going to teach you? So he puts him on his shoulder, and then then he teaches him in his ear. Okay, so this is the context now. So here is the important point is not that okay, so you should put your teacher on your shoulder. Is that's not the point. So the point is a certain message. It is not something. It is almost like a secret you tell, and this is told because this knowledge is not something. This knowledge itself is called as a secret. It's not that you're telling a secret. In fact, a secret, real secret, you don't tell. That's a secret. Once you tell somebody, it's no longer a secret. Okay. You don't tell somebody something and then tell them, oh, this is a secret, don't tell anybody. You secret means don't tell. So anyway, this knowledge is called as a secret because even when you tell, the person doesn't get it. Because it requires something else to understand. Okay. So the knowledge itself is called a secret, not your telling is the secret. So anyway, that is a context. So like that, all these dialogues have different contexts which carry their own message. And here, the whole Mahabharata is all about struggle. It's about the human struggle. It's about the struggle in our mind. It's about struggle between dharma and adharma. And in fact, that is all our life is. Day to day. We say day to day struggle, we think about, going traffic and all that. But that is not the real struggle. The real struggle is because from the minute I get up, I have to make decisions. Even getting up in the morning is a decision. And once I open my eyes, then to get out of bed is another decision. So we are making decisions all the time. And we are struggling within our own mind. And in this context, I have to now learn something which carries me through all of this. And sometimes we get immobilized completely. Sometimes we have the answers, sometimes we don't have the answers, sometimes we don't know what to do, sometimes we just collapse, like Arjuna did. So, this is the context, and there was a battle. So, in that battle, Vyasa says, okay, you know what, this whole message, the teaching that came from Sri Krishna to Arjuna, he puts it in this context as though it happened in this battlefield. Okay. So because of the nature of the teaching, the same teaching again Sri Krishna gives. Again, same teaching, nothing different he talks. He then teaches Uddhava. Uddhava, there's a called Uddhava Gita. That's all one of the things we are doing also now. So in that, the context is very different. Now it's totally different there. So the whole life is over now. People have lived their life. So Uddhava is elderly, he's become old. Sri Krishna also has become elderly. Okay. And pretty much the whole generation, that story is coming to an end. And all the Yadava, the whole clan is also going to come to an end. This is all this end of life, the end of life issues, and that is the context now. And so Uddhava, this Sri Krishna knows it's time for him also to go back to Vaikuntham. And this way, Uddhava, who has known him since childhood, gets into a panic. And then he asks him, what am I going to do after you're gone? Because one of his jobs was just to he was the driver for Sri Krishna. He was a friend of his, but then he always drove him around wherever he wanted to go. So now what am I going to do? So he is totally distraught, and then he has certain questions, and so Sri Krishna gives him the same teaching. And this, you think this is 18 chapters is long. That Uddhava Gita is still few more chapters are there. And they didn't have that much time at that time. It was all towards the end. But then it's the same teaching, it's a different context. It's a different type of a student. Not a student who's panicking, but a student who knows he's seeking some clarity at the end. So, how this teaching we learn in different contexts of life, how it's applied, how it's relevant. So, thus we will find in our scriptures all this. You see these things in the way things are depicted, in itihasas, Puranas. So it's true. So we take the context to that point. That's all. Yeah, from a practical standpoint, it's true. It probably did not happen exactly the way we visualize it in the middle of these two armies for 4 hours and everybody, or maybe they took a break. Maybe they took a break. Don't think it doesn't just start like that, a war in those days. Nowadays, it starts like that. In the middle of the night, suddenly, missiles will start falling on your head from somewhere. In those days, it was different. So people have to gather. Tens of thousands of people have to gather on both sides. So imagine how many days that took. It didn't just start overnight. So they have to gather, they have to arrange themselves, they have to get into formations, they have to do all kinds of things they have to do to prepare to go after each other. Not an impulsive decision, it is planned out. So they decide, okay, now we're going to fight. Okay, fight means, so then you give the other people a chance, you take a chance, everybody takes time to gather their forces. This is an honorable fight. Starts that way. And so all those things were taking days. Then now they come to this point. In that, what is another 4 hours? Nothing. What are they doing in the meanwhile? They're just standing around. They're just standing around preparing, you know, sharpening their swords, cleaning their rifles. All those things they are doing. That 4 hours is nothing. Then when do they start fighting? Well, they tell each other, now we are going to start fighting. And then they start blowing all their drums and conches and this and that. And then everybody gets worked up. You have to get worked up to really start fighting properly. You can otherwise, or you have to be very angry at the other person. Here they are also not very angry at each other. They all are all mamas and cousins and all on the other side. So now they have to get worked up. So this all takes a lot of time. In the meanwhile, 3 hours, these two people came on the side and they had their discussion. That's also possible. You can visualize it that way too. So, but it's important to see how the teaching is unfolded in many, many different contexts, in many different kinds of uh, guru shishya relationships, student teacher. Suppose sometimes student teacher, one is a father, one is a son. Sometimes the teacher is the son, sometimes the teacher is the father. Sometimes it's between a couple teaching. Sometimes it's between two friends. So like that, there are sometimes it is between a deva and a manushya. So that is how we understand it. Okay, next question. When you are in sorrow, you are present as a whole person. Page 160. Why is this so? Why can we not feel completely present when we are happy? Well, I think what he's trying to say here, one is completely present when one is happy also, you know, not only in sorrow. But then the point I think here, what Swamiji was trying to say was that when there is any deep emotion, you know, when we deeply feel something, you're more in touch with your being, That's the idea he was trying to talk about, the depth of feeling. So, any deep emotion brings us in touch with ourselves from the standpoint of our mind. That's See, normally our minds are very distracted. We're thinking of this, we're thinking of that, is doing so many things, it's all going in all over the direction. We talk in, sometimes you talk about mind being superficial and deep. So, what do you mean by superficial? The superficial is a thinking which is casual. So there is not so much intensity or seriousness. It's just skipping from thing to thing, like when you're watching TV. So there is nothing serious about what you're listening is not serious. There's no serious thinking involved in it. It's just keeping occupied. So you watch, you keeps things going this way, that way, and all doesn't matter. So that is a kind of a superficial. It's functioning at a superficial level. Then when you're focused, you're paying attention to something. So whether you're working or whether you're talking to somebody or whether you're listening to some person, then you're more attentive. You are there. More of you is available. You can put it that way. When the mind is just going all over the place, less of me is available. So I'm distracted by this and that, and nothing is serious. When I'm more focused, I put more of myself onto something. Like that, he says, so when you feel something very deeply, you know, and one emotion that everybody can relate to identify with, is sadness. So even as compared to joy, when you say, so because joy also is a different levels. Sometimes it's just transient. Something makes me happy. So something I got, for somebody brought me some sweets. And then I got some sweet. Oh, this is my favorite sweet. So I feel happy. Yeah, I feel happy for a little while. There is no some deep joy inside me. Fully, I am it's not that kind of a thing. Whereas sadness also you can feel superficially, you can feel a little sad about something. But then, or you're in deep sorrow. And when you're in deep sorrow, then you feel that very intensely. All of you is there in that feeling. You're like soaked in the sorrow, like a gulab jamun or something. So totally. So here, that's the idea. So he says, when you're in sorrow, you are present as a whole person, in the sense all of you is experiencing that. In fact, your mind won't even go here and there. Anything anybody try to tell you, it all just in terms of sorrow only. So that's all the idea here. There are some forms of joy also like that. Not that it's not true, but they're generally not in terms of the things that make us happy that we normally experience. There, that same depth is not there as there is depth in sorrow. next question says, in chapter 9, Sri Krishna says that he does not dwell within us. However, we are always told to look into godliness in everyone, as God is present in everyone. Could you please clarify? Okay. So first question, my point is, this chapter 9, how did we get into chapter 9? you know, we are only on chapter 2. Okay. So I think you should try to stick to the chapter. Because what happens, no, you keep in mind, when don't go ahead of yourself. There are certain topics that are covered before chapter 9 that are relevant to understanding what is said in chapter 9. So it's important to go through those things. I mean, there is always some method there in the teaching. These are not just arbitrary points here and there which we can pick up and then gain. It's like a puzzle. You pick up the different pieces and try to put here, there, and then the whole puzzle is together. It's not like that. There is a progression of ideas, of thinking, of logic, everything. It's there. So try not to go ahead and read some verses, because it's not just Sri Krishna himself says, I am in everything and I'm not in everything. He himself says that. It's not that he said that he does not dwell within us, and then and we are told that God is everywhere. Sri Krishna himself says, I am in everything and I am not in everything. So now what are you going to do? He's contradicting. Is he contradicting himself? Or is he trying to say something? And so some certain points have been covered earlier. So that is one thing. So try to just kind of restrict yourself to what you are understanding, what you're reading for now. And then as you go along, these other points will come up. But keep in mind, there are a lot of things that are there in Bhagavad Gita and elsewhere also that appear to contradict each other. But in the contradiction, you get some clarity. Okay. Because there is a certain thing. I mean, it is deliberate. It's not because, I forgot what I said before and so I contradict myself. There is So I'll just give you an example. I won't get into a detailed explanation of this. It's explainable and it is explained also. But take an example of space. There is space. There is one space. And then there are a lot of small spaces. You're in a room. So there is a room space. There is a pot. In the pot, there is pot space. In the room, there is room space. In the big building, there is this whole big space of the big building. When you buy a house, you buy a certain amount of space for which you pay. Bigger the space, more you pay. Okay. So there are different types of space, different sizes, a different function. Sometimes there's a small space in a small box. Okay. Now, from the standpoint of space, but space is, how many spaces are there? Are there many spaces, or there is one space? Really speaking, there's only one space. So now this one space tells me that I say, what about all these other spaces? There are so many different types of spaces. Each one is different character, different value. What's the connection between the one space and all these other spaces? Is there a connection? Are they separate? Are they together? Are they combined? Are they divided? My house is divided from the other house, separated by a wall. So is the space divided, etc.? All these questions are there. So the space tells me, well, I am in all these spaces. One space tells me, I am in all this space. You mean in this my room space, you are there? Yes, I'm there. In this pot also, you are there? Yes, I'm there. In this small container, you are there? Yes, I'm there. Wherever there is this small different spaces, I'm there. Oh, okay. So you are there everywhere. Wherever there is something, you are there. Yes, I'm there. But are you? No, but I'm not really there. Space. So if I have to find you, space. Oh, this one space. If I have to find you, I can go to any of these rooms. You can go to any of these rooms. But do I need to go to any of? Which one should I go to? Well, you need not go anywhere actually, because I am there all over. But I'm not there. I'm not in one place. Is Bhagavan everywhere? Bhagavan is everywhere. In front of me, yes. Behind me, yes. On top, yes. This side, yes. That side, yes. Inside me, yeah. Everywhere is there. But I don't see him. No, I don't see him. Why don't I see him if he is everywhere? Then I ask you a question. In order to see something, does it have to be everywhere or does it have to be somewhere? For you to be able to see something, does it have to be somewhere or does it have to be everywhere? Oh, it has to be somewhere. I can only see something if it is somewhere. I cannot see something if it is everywhere because it has to be separate from me. So, from the one standpoint, Bhagavan is everywhere. That means in you, in me. But then because he's everywhere, he's also not everywhere in the sense of being separate location wise, because he's all over, like space. Okay. So these are all, this is how it looks like a contradiction, but it's not really a contradiction. It is, we are understanding it from two different standpoints. But as I said, before really getting to this, there are so many other things that are mentioned also. So there are things like this which will be contradictory, which look like contradictions, but they are not a contradiction. There is space in every room. Space is everywhere where the pots, where the rooms are. So space is in everything. But at the same time, space is not in everything. It's not inside everything. It's outside also. It's inside, it's outside, it's even in between. In the walls also it's there. So looks like a contradiction, but it's not a contradiction. So like that. Chapter 2. Okay. If we are not entitled to the fruits of our action, then what is the motivation to do our duty? if we are not entitled to the fruits of our action. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. We are entitled to the fruit. In fact, whether you think you're entitled or not, there is a fruit of an action. Every action has a result. You know, every action has a result. Doesn't say you're not entitled to your result. It says you have no say over your result. You have no control over the result. You have control over the action. You don't have a control over the result of your action. It doesn't say you're not entitled to get the result of your action. Motivation is something which we have to understand what that is. Prayojanam anuddeshya mandopi na pravartate. It says without any purpose, nobody does anything. Even a non-thinking person, even an animal, without a purpose, they don't. When you do something, there is a purpose to it. If you put one foot forward, why would you do that? No, because I want to move forward. If you didn't want to move forward, you wouldn't put one foot forward. No, I don't want to move forward. I'm just shifting my body a little bit. I'm tired. Okay, that's the purpose. So nobody does any action without a purpose. It doesn't say that. Also, it doesn't say that you're not entitled to the result because, like it or not, you get the result. So there is always, we are also, of course, we are entitled to the result. May not be the result I want. That's a different story now. So the motivation is always our own desire to accomplish something. So why do we do our duty? Of course, there is a motivation to that. Always need not be negative, I want to grow. I want to mature. I want to do what is right. I want to know. There's a lot of motivations to do things. Doesn't say go about doing things like a robot with no motivation, no expectation, no desire, no nothing, no more enthusiasm, doesn't say like that. So we will look at this a little bit more next time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Okay.